All right, are you a first-time home buyer or someone thinking about buying your first home? If so, this is a podcast that you're really going to want to tune in all the way through to the end because I think it's going to have a lot of valuable information for you. If you don't know me, my name's Sawyer. I'm a realtor with Keller Williams Louisville East here in Louisville, Kentucky. Today, I want to give you some context for whether or not it's a good idea for you to buy a home going into 2025 or for you to keep renting. So I'm going to have some good reasons for you to keep renting, and then at the end I'm going to have some maybe not the best reasons for you to continue renting. So reason number one is you are not going to be here for that long. That may sound common sense, but people try to ask me that question all the time. They say, how long do I need to stay in the area for it to make sense for me to purchase a home? And really, it's going to depend. It's going to depend a lot on your area, your price point. There are several different factors. We generally would say at least 2 years. But if you really want to get granular, and this is what I would recommend, there's two things that you can do. One, I can get you connected with one of our lender partners who will have a guaranteed commitment-free conversation with you that doesn't require you apply or doesn't require you sign anything, just to understand, hey, when would it be a good idea for me to own a home? How long would I need to stay here? The second is even easier than that. So if you're not ready for the first, you may be ready for the second. You can go online and find rent versus own calculators all over the place. I think nerdwallet.com. I'm not sponsored or anything, but I think they have a really good one that I've used before. And essentially, you're trying to determine the break-even point based on the financials of how much money you have to put down, the purchase price, your payment, that kind of stuff. So those are some things that you need to consider. But basically, if you're not going to be in town for at least a couple of years, I would say maybe it's a better idea for you to just consider renting for the time being. The second reason would be that you don't have that money for the down payment, the closing costs, the maintenance, all of that stuff. If you don't have that, or you can't get that, because we do have down payment assistance options, oftentimes people have a family member or relative or something who can help out. If you are not able to access any of that, obviously you're not going to be ready to purchase a house yet, and that's totally okay, even if you're super gun-ho, okay? So to get a little bit more in the grain about that, you're going to need, if you're a first-time home buyer, probably at least 3% down, maybe more, depending on a number of different factors, your credit score, the program that you're applying for, so forth and so on. But at least 3% for your down payment. And you're also going to need another, let's call it 3 to 6% for closing costs. That's going to be prepaids, that's going to be fees, all that kind of stuff. So I would say you're going to need at least 6 to 9% of whatever you think your purchase price is in order to be safe to close on your property. So you need to be aware that the upfront cost of buying a home is fairly high. It's not super easy, and we are not in a market where there are a lot of seller concessions as of the date of recording this on September 30th, 2024. So there are some, but not a ton, and I wouldn't expect you to be able to find a home where you are just having all of your closing costs covered. It can happen, but I wouldn't hold your breath waiting for it, okay? So, third, you may have money, but you may not have money enough to do it responsibly. And here's what I mean. In some situations, people have the money for the down payment. People have the money for the closing costs. They have the money for annual maintenance, which we typically place around 1% of the value of the property per year. You may have all of that stuff, but what you don't have after you have accrued all of that for the house is any money in case any emergencies happen, and that's really important. I would hate for you to buy a house and a tragedy happens and you have to sell your house short to be able to recuperate the money to be able to deal with this tragedy or something of that sort. So I would much rather see people have a healthy savings fund, have a healthy emergency fund before you ever try to buy a house or really any big expense that you might make. It's very important that you are financially healthy before you go out and make these big decisions. Number 4, this is the one that is going to ouch for some people. You need to have a budget, and you need to be able to stick to that budget pretty close. And it's going to depend on the kind of budget you have. If you have a super tight every dollar budget, You may not be able to stick to it exactly, but you need to be within a very close amount of variation. There are a lot of people that I have met that have said, hey, Sawyer, I would love to buy a house, but like, I just keep buying new cars. I just keep buying fancy watches. We keep going on these $5,000-$10,000 vacations. And they're my age. They're 27. They're married like me, maybe, and don't have any kids. And they are having a hard time making a choice between investing in their future and investing in their present. And I'm not here to tell you whether that is right or wrong, but what I am here to do is to tell you that if your plan is to buy a house, then your actions need to match that plan, okay? So that's reason number 4. That would be a good reason for renting. If you're in any of those situations, hey, maybe just stay renting for a while. But if you're saying, Sawyer, I really, really would like to own a home, I really, really would like to be able to benefit from equity and appreciation of my property. And I realize that there are going to be some costs, but the benefit of owning a home far outweighs the costs of maintaining it. Now, I want to talk about 5 reasons why it may not be the best idea for you to continue renting. So these reasons are sort of on the opposite hand of the 4 that I gave, but they are reasons that people sometimes give me that I don't think are maybe the most well-reasoned reasons. Number 1 is you just don't like responsibility. You don't want to be the one who is responsible for taking care of the maintenance. You don't want to have to save the money to come up with the down payment and the closing costs. You don't want to have to do all of that stuff. You'd rather just pay the payment every month. And if you miss a payment, you get kicked out and you got to go find a new place, and it is what it is. And I've met people like that. Don't be a person like that. It's not a good investment in your future or in your character. So let's try to avoid that one. Number 2 is going to be that you're waiting for prices to drop. Unfortunately, even though we are at record high inventory here in Louisville, Kentucky, compared to any time in the last 4 years, except, well, I shouldn't say that. Any time in the last 2 years, we have matched a 2-year sort of high. We were down in the slumps and we've risen back up to where we were at in like September of 2022. Despite that, we still have very low inventory. We are not even nearly at an even market in terms of the amount of months of supply that we have. And if you don't know what that is, months of supply is simply this. It's a measurement that we use to keep track of how long the market would continue to have homes on the market if we didn't add any more inventory. And right now we're somewhere around 2-ish months. An average market, a kind of neutral market, is around 6 months, and we haven't been there in quite some time, so I don't anticipate prices coming down. Now, I do see a lot of price reductions in the market where people opportunistically maybe or overshoot how much they think their home is worth when they go to list it, and they have to reduce the price on the back end. But that is not a home losing its value. That's not really prices going down. That's just prices not ever reaching where people hoped that they would for their specific property. So alongside of number 2, prices going down, is number 3, waiting for interest rates to go down. So there's a lot of chatter in the news right now as of the last few weeks because the Fed has lowered their prime lending rate by 50 basis points. If you don't know what that means, it's not all that important to you. Just know your credit cards, your student loans, all those things are based off of the prime lending rate. So interest on those things is roughly going to be correlated to the prime rate. That is not true for mortgage interest rates. Mortgage interest rates are based off something called mortgage-backed securities. It's fairly complicated, but all you need to know is that it's not a one-for-one between the prime rate and mortgage interest rates. And in fact, over the last couple of weeks, we've actually seen mortgage interest rates slowly increase, not much, by about 1/8 of a point the last time that I checked after that cut to the rate. So if we continue to see improvements in the economy as the election unfolds and as inflation goes down, if it does, and as unemployment rises, because unfortunately that is actually something that's positive for interest rates. If we see those things start to adjust, we could see more impact on mortgage interest rates. But what you should know is right now, we should not expect mortgage interest rates to fall dramatically. And even if they do, we are going to be in a situation where there is not a lot of inventory. A lot of buyers will get into the market because interest rates dipped. And so that's going to create a little peak in activity. That's not good for buyers. That's going to make it more competitive. That's going to make it hotter. That's going to make it more expensive for you as a buyer. So waiting for interest rates to go down is probably not your best bet. Number 4, you think the cost of home ownership is just far too high. I've already touched on this in this podcast, but what you need to know is that the cost of home ownership is roughly around 1% of the purchase price annually. So you should save that up every year, even if you don't have that cost incurred in a given year. Because what may happen is, let's say that you need a new roof and it's going to be $10,000. Well, if you haven't been saving for several years, you won't have that money saved up, and it's going to hurt a lot for you to do that. So I would just encourage you to do that. That being said, people sometimes overblow how much the cost of home ownership is. On average, it's only about 1% of the purchase price. And on average, homes appreciate or go up in value by 3 or 4% in our market. So that means that you're making money even with the cost of home ownership. The real question is just, can you afford the upfront cost of home ownership, the cost of the purchase, more than about whether or not you can afford the cost of maintenance? Now, the 5th reason that is not a good reason for you to rent is that you just don't want to be committed. This is more, again, personal preference. This is where I'm a realtor, I'm putting my cards out there. I am committed to staying in this city. I'm committed to building a family with my wife and to building a business as I have over the last many years. And I'm committed to sticking here. But you may not be, okay? However, ask yourself, going back to our first point, are you committed to being here for 24 months, for 36 months, for however long it would be to get to a break-even point in your city? If you are, then maybe it's a good idea for you to buy. Maybe it's a good idea for you to stop renting. Okay? I don't know who you are. I don't know who's on the other side of this camera, but what I do know is that homeownership is one of the best predictors of wealth in the United States and has been for a long time. I also know that the median homebuyer age now is 35 years old, and not too many years ago it was my age, it was 27. So we are running into a scenario where younger people like myself and my wife are no longer wanting to purchase homes. And it's not even that they can't, it's that a lot of us don't want to. I would encourage you to revisit that question, because I think that you may not understand the cost of choosing not to buy. Those are my thoughts on the matter. Those are my opinions on the matter, I guess I should say. I can't talk too much. So this has been our first episode here, talking about whether you should buy or rent in 2025. I'm not going to always say it's always a good time to buy. I'm also not going to be a doomsday person. It's the right time for some people. Statistically, it's not the right time for most people, because most people move every 5 to 7 years and not every single year, which means that these things come and go in cycles. So if you would like to ask more questions about this topic or any other topic, feel free to reach out to me. I would love to answer any questions that you have. Until then, I'll see you on the next one.